Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. We are a weekly podcast dedicated to sincere, in-depth investigations into the paranormal, supernatural, and the metaphysical, with a special focus on the UFO topic. We take a sincere, analytical approach, thoroughly evaluating each case and its implications. Our discussions go beyond the surface as we engage with researchers, investigators, and experiencers to explore the deeper layers of their testimonies. We strive for high-resolution analysis, carefully examining evidence, patterns, and perspectives that challenge conventional thinking. If you're looking for a podcast that seeks deeper understanding, you're in the right place. Please be sure to like and subscribe and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranormallypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. Thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in tonight with us. We have a great show coming up. We have Mary A. Joyce. She's an author, investigative researcher. She's the editor of a website called Sky Ships Over Cashiers. She talks about UFOs and sightings, underground bases, and mystical Cherokee Little People. She has decades of experience in both mainstream journalism and paranormal investigation. She's going to bring a powerful blend of credibility and curiosity to this subject. And Mary, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, you're muted, Mary.
To be with you guys. How you doing?
Doing fine, thank you.
We clearly are a group that are interested in the same things. I get into the UFOs and the Bigfoot and the Cherokee Little People and the underground bases and anything paranormal, and apparently that's what you guys do too.
Yes. Mary, can you tell us a bit about yourself? What got you started in all this?
It depends on the subject. When I lived in Florida many years ago, that's when I got interested in UFOs. I lived between Patrick Air Force Base and the Kennedy Space Center, got to know one of the astronauts and many of the people who worked at NASA, saw UFOs down there, and the people who were with NASA absolutely did not deny them. They would tell me some very interesting tales. So that's where I got interested in UFOs. I got interested in Bigfoot and Little People and underground bases here in North Carolina mountains because we have all three of those things here. And everything's been a bit of a surprise every time I've come upon something, and then it just kind of grows.
Very good. Jim, do you want to start us out here?
Yeah, sure. So I think let's delve into the Cherokee Little People. And I'm not exactly sure where that story begins. Maybe we'll start with the first encounters or known encounters of the Cherokee Little People, of the Cherokee Indians, right? Moved from where they were into the mountains of North Carolina, and then began
ages ago, the Cherokee people migrated to the mountains of North Carolina. When they got here, they saw these little gardens and they didn't see any people. Eventually, at nighttime, they would see these little people come out from the ground and get their vegetables from the garden and take them back underground. And so originally, the Cherokee called them the moon people because they came out in the light of the moon. Some people think it's because they were moon-eyed like ETs. They are not. They have eyes that are, in proportion to us, but, very human-like.
Are those two different types of things? Is it a moon-eyed people and then the Cherokee Little People. Are they the same?
That was the first. Yes, they're the same. That's
Okay.
the first name that the Cherokee gave these little people because they saw them only at night when they would come out. So they called them the Moon People. But they are now known as the Cherokee Little People. And they're about 3.5 feet tall. There are still some in very remote areas here in the mountains. Primarily, they hang out where the reservation is or where there's large areas of Cherokee. But they're few and far between, and very few people get to see them.
Wow.
But that isn't where I started. I didn't know a thing about Cherokee Little People. And I got into a conversation with an elderly man, and I'd become friends with him over time. And we got into a discussion of the little people. I thought it was just like allegorical stories or teaching stories. I didn't really think they were real. And he said, oh, no, they're real. And he said when he was a young man, and when I met him, he was getting close to 90. He said when he was a young man, after World War II, he got involved with early construction at Western Carolina University, which is about 20 minutes from where I live. And everywhere that they dug into what was supposed to be virgin land, they would find these little tunnels. And the tunnels were, roughly 2 feet across and about 3.5, 4 feet tall with an arched top. All of them were cut into this real dense red clay. And it's like every time they were constructing something new at the campus, they would run into these little tunnels. And
they felt that they were anomalous, that you just don't run into these tunnels anywhere. And these are something. Was there any kind of prosaic explanation for what the tunnels might be, or was it from
they lived underground, and Western Carolina University had to have been like a little people city or community at one time, because they were finding these tunnels anytime they did new construction, or many times I should say. And so it was a community there. Is that?
Yeah, I was just wondering that the construction workers or people who were excavating, whether there was any kind of prosaic explanation for or these were just completely anomalous sort of tunnel structures that they've never seen before.
When they were building the structures here, they thought they were building on virgin land. They had no idea that they would discover these tunnels when they would, dig for construction, and they did. Mm-hmm. And bit of irony, one of the oldest buildings on the campus is called the McKee Building, and buildings can only get built like this in the mountains. Originally, it was a 2-story building. At a later date, they made a basement beneath it. So they cut into behind it and down under it and created a 3rd floor, which was actually like a basement. When they were doing that, they found 3 of these little tunnels going out from what became the basement of the McKee Building. Those tunnels are still there. The irony is they went in, since I started doing the research, and they put in some supporting walls, big, heavy supporting walls. So the tunnels are on the other side of this reinforcement wall. I've been kind of annoyed with the university for 2 reasons. One is, if they had preserved that, if they'd even kept a peek hole where you could see the tunnels, it could have been the basis for a wonderful archaeology program. They do have an anthropology, but not an archaeology. And I think they missed the boat. And the second reason I became annoyed with them was because they were more concerned about building buildings than preserving a really unique piece of history. And one man that I talked to said that when he was a student there, that he and some of his buddies were by one of the creeks on the campus. We have creeks all over the place here. And the head of security came by, and he was carrying something bigger than a shoebox. And the guys got into a conversation with him. And he said he was taking some of the little bones they found at the construction that was going on at that time, and he was taking them somewhere else to rebury them. So they were going to, great extents to keep the building projects going, and taking some of the evidence off to who knows where. Now, the best evidence that many people got to see was a professor had a little skull on his desk, sort of like a decorative conversation piece. And he said it was a child's skull from an Indian mound. Well, there was a teacher, a high school teacher, who came by and picked it up one day and looked at it closely and said, "This is not a child's skull. It has all its wisdom teeth." And you have to be about 18 or more before you start hatching wisdom teeth. The rest of that skeleton was kept on the professor's mantle. I question how his wife put up with that. I can't imagine having a skeleton on my mantle, but nevertheless, that's where the rest of the little creature was.
Wow, that's interesting.
Where did that skull or where did that skeleton wind up? Is that still?
It was at the university in their archive, not their archives, not for public display, but like I don't know, almost like a scientific holding room. Then, since then, those kind of things, including 2 giant skeletons, were sent to the Smithsonian. Now, I don't know how up you are on the Smithsonian, but back in the 1800s and early 1900s, there were lots of skeletons that were quite large being found all across the country. And they would bring in the Smithsonian to take the skeletons, and they would be taken to the Smithsonian and never seen again. And there have been a few people who've written about that. So I don't know if we'll ever see the things I'm talking about again or not.
Now, could that have been like the giant Indians that I hear about from back in the 1800s and early 1900s? Could have been skeletons from them, because they're, I guess, reported to be 7 to 12 feet tall.
I think 7, 8 feet tall is what I've heard the most. I don't know if it's been determined if they're Indian or not. I don't know if. I'm sure a scientific person could tell you by analyzing the DNA, but I do not know. It's probably been done, but I have never heard the results of it.
So has there ever been any sort of serious scientific attention into the matter of the Cherokee Little People? Has there been some, major archaeologists who took it seriously, or what's?
When I did my book, I had multiple reasons for doing it. One, I spent Saturdays for a year around kitchen tables interviewing some of these men who were all elderly at that time, who had been involved with construction at Western Carolina University. And when I realized that nobody had recorded anywhere their information, and these guys were all mostly in their 80s, pushing 90, I'm going, I've got to save this information. So that was the motivation for doing the book, which I titled Cherokee Little People Were Real. The title would be different if I were to give the title today, because I now know there are still some that exist around here. At the time I did the book originally, I didn't have any evidence of that.
Right. So is there any archaeological evidence for anywhere in America of the existence of or fossils of small statured humans? I know, I think there is on an island in Indonesia, I think the island of Flores.
That's a very, very small species. It's smaller than the ones I'm talking about.
Okay.
The ones I'm talking about.
Homo floresiensis, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. I wasn't going to attempt to say it. Thank you.
Yeah, I can barely say it, but so there's no I mean, that's strange. Well, but I guess it's strange in light of, that there seems to be indications of a cover-up, but there's never been.
I've been very, very puzzled why why there's such an effort to keep our real history hidden from people. Let me jump to a different topic. I did a book called Spy in the Sky, and over a number of years, I used Google Earth to explore Antarctica and the bottom of the ocean and Mars. And I found all these things that were just incredible. And within a day or two of me posting them on my website, they would suddenly be blurred, so beyond recognition. So I kept screenshots of all these things, and I can, in the book I show before and after shots. Why are they hiding it?
They would go on your website and blur them, so they were not blurry
No, no,
pictures.
no, 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 no,
Okay.
no. After they would see them on my website, they would blur the original Google Maps so that when anybody else went to see them, they wouldn't be there any longer. And one of the, I know this is off subject, but
that's
who
like
knows
really, that's like really good proof, though, that there was something significant about what you found. You know, if you could
Right.
go there and look at it now, and it's been obscured. But anyway, go
Uh-huh.
ahead. Sorry to cut you off.
I know we're wandering. You don't mind wandering all over the place, I trust.
No.
One of the things I found in Antarctica that I really to this day find exciting was with all the ice melting down there, we found 5 ancient cities that were being, uncovered as the ice melted. We're talking where you could see the wall structures and the structures together spread out like a city would spread out. Again, that was something that was blurred out after we posted it on the website. That's incredible information. Most scientists believe that Antarctica has been covered in ice for like 34 million years. That's a long time. And that means these would be the oldest structures in the world. And somebody said, well, what about the Great Pyramid? The Great Pyramid's only like 5,000 years old. That's like a flash in the pan compared to 34 million years. Why are they hiding this? I found a aerial view of 2 pyramids under the water just south of, I think it's Paradise Island off the Bahamas. And after I posted that, it's like they took a photographic strip and put it right there where the pyramids were. And then you couldn't see it anymore. But you could see the cut strip, just like a Band-Aid. Now I'm going, you guys, again, I got pictures before they did that.
It's strange that it took you to discover that before, as if they didn't even know. Like, presumably they knew about this. Whoever's doing the cover up, and the obscuring, they know that stuff exists, but nobody has gone, beforehand and made sure that none of it could be seen. It took you to sort of post it before they took the trouble, which is a strange, I don't know, kind of facet of that, that
all of my books, and there's been 5 of them that are in print, are available on Amazon, except for Spy in the Sky. That's the one where I discovered all these things. I've been blocked in so many ways from that book getting out. And so I can only really, it's the only thing I sell on my website. And so if you go to Editor's Corner, there's information there about my books and how to get that one that you can't get through Amazon. And it's like a picture book for adults. I mean, I've got all these satellite photos, of UFOs landed on Mars and contemporary entrances into Mars. I often use that story as a way of teaching people that you got to think outside the box. Because usually when I would go to Mars or the moon or the Earth, I go to right to left or left to right, like this. One day I decided I would go from pole to pole. And that's when I discovered, I'm going to get my numbers wrong, I think it's 27 entrances spread out over 16 miles. And they're all square cut like this. And they're all in a line. And if I hadn't gone the polar route, I wouldn't have discovered them all.
Interesting. Yeah. So not to get sidetracked on Mars, maybe we can come back to this real quick. Do you believe, does that, I mean, because we have all of the testimonies of like the secret space program whistleblowers, that some of them claim to have been on bases on Mars and have a lot of compelling testimonies and corroborating stories of a base called Ares Prime. Have you ever thought about it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. These entrances are contemporary. And back in December of, may have been 2020, the man in Israel, who was the head of space security for nearly 30 years for Israel, came out in the Jerusalem Post. And I can't quote it, but he stated that American astronauts are working with the ETs on Mars, and they're working underground. And I thought that was a very interesting source to collaborate some of what we're hearing from these people who tell us the stories about long-term missions on Mars, and they come back and they're the same age and stuff. I've never written about that because it's so hard to prove that kind of stuff. I'm not saying they're not probably telling the truth, but I used to be a newspaper person, and it's really hard for me to do something without having some kind of credibility to it that's beyond just a story somebody tells.
Right. I think with me, it's just that some of them, a small percentage of them, tell a story that's so cogent and so detailed and vivid. The memory recall and the amount of just the richness of the detail is just so impressive that,
like, somebody couldn't make it up on the fly, right?
yeah, like it would just be impossible to make all that up, and it doesn't seem, based on the type of people who are telling the story, they don't seem like psychotic type people that are confabulating, and that they seem like sincere type people.
Have you been able to interview some of those on your show?
Yeah, so we have interviewed, if you've heard of him, Tony Rodriguez, or actually it's pronounced Rodriguez, I think, and a couple others, Penny Bradley, and one other more recent one who's come out named, or it's not really her real name. What's her name, Todd?
What, 1K Golden?
No, the other secret space program whistleblower. She wouldn't show her face. Anyway, it's on our channel under Secret Space Program Whistleblowers. But yeah, we have interviewed a few of them, and I find, well, both Penny Bradley's testimony and Tony Rodriguez pretty compelling, and I think the implications of those tests, there's broader implications beyond just the fact that we have settlements and colonization outside of the system, but just the technology that they're using, space-time manipulation technology. It really opens up just an enormous rabbit hole as far as what they're up to, in space, and I find it impossible not to at least,
Well, it seems to me that our rocket-based program, or programs that we get to see on our media, it seems like a very expensive diversion, because they're not getting to Mars that way. There's just no way.
Right.
At the very least, spaceships are coming in, picking them up, and taking them over. There's other ways also, but that would be one step up from what we're doing right now. And it's a lot of money being spent for something that's really kind of out of date for what they're actually doing.
I know, and that a lot of money, I guess, hints at the scale, the scale of the cover up. It does suggest something about the profundity, maybe, of what they're covering up with it. If they're willing to create NASA. Some people think that NASA is just, and always has been, just a front, for these covert programs, that are exploring and colonizing Mars. And that's one hell of a cover up and expenditure. But anyway, do you want to circle back to?
You do what you ever want to. Ring me in. That's okay.
Let's circle back to the Cherokee Little People and hear some of the stories. Well, first of all, what is the totality of? Is there any more to what the Cherokees knew about them? I don't know if there's an oral tradition of the Cherokee where some things are mentioned about the Cherokee Little People, or what else can we learn from them about the Cherokee Little People? What other details have they been able to provide?
All right. Before we get into people interacting with little people that are living today, let me bring up one more thing that's of an archaeological nature. There was a major flood here. I mean, major flood in 1940, and a 5-year-old boy found what he called a lead head, and it was a very heavy metal like medallion, had a seam around the edge of it, and it had like a leprechaun's face on each side of it. And I didn't learn about him until he was in his 70s, and I do have a picture of it in my book. It looks like a leprechaun, and in my book I have a leprechaun's profile next to this little medallion. This medallion has to be old because it came from so deep under the ground that had never been, disturbed before until this major flood. Then that ties together with a story which really surprised me when I first heard it. I heard that the Cherokee, there were 2 kinds of little people, and there was one kind with red whiskers that the Cherokee didn't like, and they wanted to kill them. I thought, wow. And when they said red whiskers, and then I saw this medallion with like a leprechaun's face on it, I thought that sounds more like something from Ireland, like a different race of little people. And I just found that very interesting. But that was a concrete medallion that he had found, and it was quite old.
It was made out of concrete? Like it was...
No. It was metal.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, it was metal.
It was metal.
It was
Okay.
cast. It was a cast metal medallion, and you could see the seam around the edge. And there was like a leprechaun's face on each side of the medallion.
Okay, but it was a concrete sort of piece of evidence, like it was...
Right, but not cement.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting, and that suggests that that they're making things. If that was made by them, that they have some kind of metallurgy or knowledge of metallurgy, I guess.
Well, we don't know who did those. We don't know if those little red whiskered guys did it or if the Cherokee did it. But it's
or
the
if
only...
the humans did it, or if some group of humans did it, but it was, portraying the little people for some reason. I don't know why we would make something
we're never going to know the answer to. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do the book. My God, if all these guys died and their stories were never told, they would be gone forever. And I really made it a mission to record it. So, but there's some, go ahead. You were about to talk. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the medallion, is it someplace?
The man has it. The man still has it. He treasures it. He won't. I hope he has plans for when he passes away that it gets passed on to, I don't know, someplace that would actually preserve it. And there you have to be careful. Look what's happened to the little people bones. They're gone. So it's but he carefully guards it. As far as I know, he's still doing that. I haven't been in touch with him for years now, but that's the end of the story as far as my involvement goes.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as real life stories, there's a lot of them. One of the most common things is that the old timers among the Cherokee will put food out for the little people at night. And there's humorous stories about when they forget to do it, that the regular Cherokee people will hear pebbles on their roof. It's like to remind them that, hey, where's the food? I've heard that story more than once. And then I've heard some really cute stories, all from the Cherokee. One gal, when she was young, her family had a small camper trailer up in an area called Big Cove, which is kind of a remote part at a high elevation on the Cherokee reservation. And they used that for family gatherings or picnics, and they would use the trailer as a place for the kitchen and the bathroom. On one of these gatherings, she, as a child, was playing hide and seek with some of the other children, and she decided to hide in the shower of the little camper trailer. When she pulled back the curtain, there was a little Cherokee man just smiling really big. It startled her and scared her, and she went running back to her daddy. But the little person was kind of playing along with the kids. Another story was,
Yeah, it almost gives the impression that, maybe there's like a little bit of mischievousness
oh
to
yeah,
that.
we hear
Uh,
that.
and the
We hear
rocks
that.
as well kind of suggest that.
Well,
They're
that's kind of funny. Hey,
throwing
you
them
forgot to
barrels.
put the food out. I think
Yeah,
that's funny. I don't take that seriously at all.
yeah.
Um, that the only really mischievous story I heard was when I was out in South Dakota at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, where they also have little people. And uh, one of the women that I met, she was 29 at the time. Her grandfather was a shaman, her brother was a shaman, and she was very intuitive. And somehow she opened up with me when I was out there. And she told several stories. One was about when her cousins, her male cousins, were swimming in one of the creeks out there. They saw a little cave off the side of the creek, and they went in it, and they found a little quiver, little arrows, and a little bow, and they took them. And they took them back to their home. And when their grandfather learned what they had done, he said, "You take that back right away. Don't mess with the little people." Well, I understand that they did, but the whole town or village or whatever had trouble for a little while with the little people messing with their chickens and just doing mischievous things. And I
Mm,
can't say I blame the little people. They're
mm.
little and they don't want to be bothered. They weren't bothering anybody else. And it was sort of like, leave us alone. This just, don't mess with us. And
And they want to sort of maintain maybe that sort of culture or that cultural element, that the Cherokee people seem to have of, don't mess with the little people because they'll do this or that. So maybe it's also kind of, I don't know why that you just thought of that. Maybe it's a necessity for them to kind of commit the mischief so as to kind of
let
uh
people won't mess with them. Right.
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mary, was there more than just the one race of these little people? Were there a couple races? Did you ever
The
hear
two
anything?
the two I've only heard of are the ones that look like the Cherokee, only just smaller. The dark straight hair and dark
Yes.
eyes, and the other, which I haven't talked to anybody who's ever seen them, are the ones that they tell about being in the area long ago with the red whiskers.
The red
And
whiskers,
those
yes,
are
yes.
those are the only two that I have ever heard about in this area.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was just curious. I was like, well, wait, maybe there's others to tie in with this. But yeah, and it's kind of strange when we have these other races and they kind of get like swept under the rug. You know what I mean? Like you was saying, there's very little, if any, artifacts of this species, and that's a shame because we could learn so much.
The Like I said, there are Cherokee who interact with them. Um, there's an area here in North Carolina. It's called Snowbird. There are more full-blooded Indians that live in Snowbird than on the Cherokee Indian Reservation. And one young Indian woman, she went to visit her aunt and uncle who live in Snowbird. And somehow or another, they were talking about the little people. And her uncle said, "Wait, I'll show you." And what he did was he took flour and spread it all over the front porch or the deck or whatever it was. And in the morning, when they got up, there were the little footprints that you could see in the flour that he had
Oh
put on
wow.
the. So,
Wow.
okay.
Wow. That story kind of makes you feel like they're not just like out there, you know, and rarely encountered, that they're kind of right in our midst, and maybe.
They're in the midst of the Cherokee. You don't see too many white
Mm,
people that have, or any other kind of race,
mm.
being involved with them. It's the relationship is with the Cherokee themselves.
I wonder,
And
are they spiritual advisors or protectors? Do you know any of that?
Oh, there's a story I did decades ago, I think. And there are little people out in the West somewhere. I'm not going to be able to tell you much about this story. It's
That's
really in the back of my head. But there was a tribe out in the West that revered the little people, and they would seek them out for guidance and information.
Okay.
But I don't have any other stories, not like that around here. Now, another thing that, again, I've had a lot of nice surprises during all of this. And I got a call from a couple that I know who live like a couple ridges over from me. And they had debated for some time about telling me what they had. And they had a game cam set up by their driveway. And they're up on a single lane gravel road up at the top of a ridge. And a bird or something triggered it. And off in the background, you can see what appears to be a little person, a male with long black hair. You can't see him clearly. It was taken in August. It was very hot. He had little or no clothes on. I think more like a loincloth type of thing. It was not clear. And the couple had been debating between the two of them about whether they were seeing a spirit on the camera or whether it was a real being. So when they finally gave it to me and I put it on my computer, I turned up the contrast. And when you do that, anything that's alive will go to a magenta color. Anything's like a spirit or a ghost will just stay white. So I got some ghost pictures. And the one that I used, to tell the story was a ghost that was down on his hands and knees playing with a very alive little child. And when I turned up the contrast, the little child went to magenta and the ghost stayed white. Well, when we did this with the little figure off in the distance, it went to magenta. So it was very much alive and not a spirit. But it's not real clear, but it clearly was alive. And the man went out there and they measured it by a tree to see how tall it would have been. And it fell right into that area of like 3.5 feet.
Yeah.
So.
And also, I think you mentioned that they look like the Cherokee, that their features and the hair color, they seem to resemble the Cherokee natives, which
Correct.
that's correct, and which is kind of mysterious. And how do we?
No, it's not really mysterious, because if you go back in any of the cultures, it's the brown eyes, it's the straight black hair that you find all over this country. So that doesn't mean that they are descendants of the Cherokee, which is, I think, where your mind was going.
Okay, so they don't really look like the Cherokee per se, but they just look like any indigenous American, with the type of skin tone and dark hair.
Most likely, yeah.
Okay, I see.
And then I had another surprise. I had was let me back up. For years, I worked for large corporations and newspapers, and I reached a point where I moved to the mountains, and I wanted a job where I could leave it at the end of the day so I could have time to do some of the things I wanted to do. Because if you work for big corporations, they own you, and you're you're always doing something. And I got a job as the manager of a health food store. I didn't think that would become the place that would give me so many stories. And some of the stories about the underground bases, about the UFOs, about the Cherokee Little People, about the Bigfoot, those started with conversations with people at that health food store. And the nice thing about a health food store is that you can get into comfortable conversations with people, the kind of conversations you would not have at a grocery store or some other place. And so that's where many of the stories really originated from. And I'm very grateful for them. And I never thought that would happen. Anyhow, I became friends with an Indian woman. And one day we were talking about the little people. And at some point she said she thought her granddaughter was a little person. And I'm going, that doesn't make any, to myself, that doesn't make any sense. And so I ultimately found out that the father was from Hawaii, and there were little people in Hawaii in that family chain. So there was little people in the chain from the Cherokee half of this, of the family. And so the two, what do you call it, recessive genes came together, and here was this little person. Well, the grandmother brought her in. She was, oh, I don't remember her age now, middle teens maybe. And she had the shape of a mature Cherokee woman, but her eyes would just barely come over the top of the counter. And she wore sunglasses all the time. She preferred pink ones. And it made me wonder, the Cherokee Little People have always been known for living underground. So is there something in the eyes after that becomes sensitive to light? Because she always would wear the sunglasses. She was never able to stay in school for any great length of time. Her immune system didn't seem to be up to some of the germs that we pass around. She was taken to a specialist. He could not figure out, he knew there was something different about this child. The parents didn't want it known that she might be a Cherokee little person, so they would never level with the doctor. So he was just puzzled. I wish they hadn't felt that way, because imagine a very inquisitive specialist really doing a study on that child. It would have been very, very enlightening. And it's too bad that the parents wouldn't do it. Just wouldn't do it. In fact, I wanted to write the story up. I actually had the whole story written, and they decided they didn't want the story, put out there. So I can't say much more than what I'm telling you right now. But
Mary, how long ago was that?
If I got into my files, I could probably tell you a lot. Probably at least 10 years.
10 years. Okay. I was just curious because I know
it could have been longer, but at least
because if it was way back, I can kind of understand why they wouldn't say anything back, going back far. If you mention anything about what we're talking about now, hearing voices out of the air or anything like that, you would end up in Pennhurst or something. The asylum.
I assume that's an asylum. Okay. It's true. Sometimes it seems like we as a human race are going backwards, but we have made some progress, and there's a lot more people not only open to these ideas, but they're curious about these subjects. And if you just meander around the internet or YouTube, you will find out that the extent of the interest is quite great.
Yes, and that's why I can totally empathize with that couple with that possible little Cherokee person, because just telling that to somebody, people would automatically be like, oh, right. we did research.
They wouldn't want the doctor thinking they were crazy people.
Right. It'd be like, hey, we're gonna lock this person up so we can get some good data.
Yeah. So, but it is regrettable that it couldn't have been done.
Yes.
And so the implication of that story is that there has been interbreeding.
That's the implication there. And before we even today, I tried to dig through the files. I must have saved it somewhere. In the Cherokee newspaper, I found a wedding announcement about that size, about 2 columns and by 3, something like that. And there was an Indian woman with this man who was noticeably shorter than she was. Dramatically shorter. And I couldn't help but think that he looked like she was marrying a little person, because the Cherokee themselves aren't that tall. So when you see a dramatic difference in height, then we're talking about a very short little man. And it was in the paper. God, I hope I've got it somewhere.
Right. And this, we trust your wisdom and guidance that you're giving us, and we don't expect you to remember everything. So, just basics here or there is good enough for us.
Well, it's a good thing, because my brain just won't drag stuff up from 10, 15 years ago.
Right. And you're a credible person. So we have, we want our audience to know that you have nothing to gain from telling us a huge story. You know what I mean? So
this has not been a money-making operation for me at all. Right. Period.
This is research.
It's research, and it's stuff that I'm not seeing other places, and I just want it to be preserved, and I want it to get out there. That's my motivation. If I was motivated by money, I would be doing something quite different.
Yes. And this is disclosure. So we're trying
And
to.
also, I should probably mention that I've done many things in my life, but I was also an editor for a newspaper in Michigan, and I also work for the Orlando Sentinel. And so I've got this newspaper training. It's like you got to have the evidence. You can't just make statements. You've got to have something to back it up.
Yes.
So there's a part of my brain that's always working that way, and that's why some stories don't get posted, because I just can't get enough out there to really be convinced myself that it's worthy of consideration.
And you was an investigative journalist, correct?
I did well. I by default, I got into. I was a feature editor in Michigan, and I got involved in doing a little bit of the undercover work involving the mob in Detroit. I was younger, and I could get away with a lot of stuff I can't get away with now. But that wasn't my job. I was actually the feature editor, and was friends with the major investigative reporter for the paper, and we teamed up to do some of these things.
Wow.
So if there was interbreeding going on, then they must have been intermingling with our species at some point in the past. And that's surprising. And I wonder if that intermingling was able to be possible because they're kind of close. Look, and the Cherokee aren't that tall to begin with, and they're very close, I guess, appearance-wise to Homo sapien. And they could pass, do you think, as human, or do you think that
they look like humans? Yeah. It's just a size difference.
Just the size difference, yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're not like a dwarf or some a different kind of a shape, and no, they're just different kind of human.
Right, but yet, like if you would encounter an older one, that was 3.5 feet tall, that would clearly strike someone as odd and strange, a 3.5 foot tall adult.
Well, one of the guys who worked on construction at Western Carolina University, he talked about this family of little people who lived in that area, and I think they called the guy Toby. Again, I'm digging it up from a long time ago, and Toby drove a truck that had to have the seat built up and the pedals built up because he was too little to drive the truck. And but the people that told me the story said he had a family, and they called him Toby, and he had a house with smaller furniture. And so,
oh, interesting.
But that's somebody who's clearly come out of the woods and is blending in with the major culture. Most of the ones living today, for the most part, are trying to stay away from the major culture. And maybe for good reason. I'm not even sure I trust us.
Yeah. And so is there a concentration, like you mentioned, I think earlier, about Native American tribes out west being aware of small statured humans and looking at them as people of wisdom to get information from. So this is something that is all over the continent, or is there
around the world? There are little people. Think of the Irish. And I'm not talking about the fairy people, but they talk about the leprechauns. So it's
is there any parallels other than their size? Has there been any stories of tunnels being found, strange tunnels being found, or when excavating England?
I don't know.
Yeah. And is there a lot more that could potentially be gained as far as understanding from the Cherokee? Are there Cherokees still alive who know a lot more about this, who have maybe even deep knowledge or some untapped knowledge of the Cherokee Little People that?
Well, like the stories that I told you about the little person hiding in the shower and the feet in the flower on the porch. Those are stories I've gotten from the Cherokee themselves, and those are never easy to get. For example, the one lady who told me about the shower story, she worked with a waitress at a restaurant I went to, and I was friends with the one waitress. She knew the kind of stuff I was into, and she spent I guess it was over quite a lengthy bit of time to convince an Indian woman that she worked with that I was okay to talk to. So these stories don't come easily. And the stories of the people who worked on the construction at Western Carolina University, I couldn't have just knocked on the doors and gotten those stories from those people. And most of those people were white, because it's kind of an odd story. But because I had this one man who knew all the others, he opened the door for me to meet with the others. It never would have happened without his help. So some of these kind of offbeat stories, you need some magic tricks to kind of get to where people know you and trust you.
And why exactly are they so reticent? Because they feel that there'll be...
There's multiple reasons. For a total different story, there was a couple that kept coming into the health food store, and they would, each time they would come in, they'd gingerly have this conversation about UFOs with me. And finally I said, well, why don't I interview you sometime? And they agreed to it. And I met them at their camper trailer in the Smoky Mountain National Park. That was not the reason they wanted to talk to me. This woman had grown up on a secret base. Her father had high security clearance. Everybody who was affiliated with that base was sworn to secrecy. Those who talked or blabbed would end up with heart attacks or just suddenly become vegetables. So they all lived in fear about talking. Wow. So that's why she was so careful about finding out if she could trust me. And she wanted it to be known that one of the facilities here in North Carolina, they had the capacity to wipe out people's memories, and that the facility was 6 stories deep. And you know, again, it took a long time for her to trust me enough to share the story. And later, when I posted some of her stories, but using a different name, I got confirmation from other people who confirmed the things she was telling me. So one thing just kind of leads to another.
Wow. Yeah, I'd like to get into the underground bases at some point, but let's just linger a little longer on the Cherokee Little People. So to me, this seems just like a great frontier of, I mean, there's just, it seems like everything is just unknown still, you know. There may be 2 species.
There's no evidence that the ones with the red whiskers still exist around here. There's none. So maybe the Cherokee did a good job of killing them off. I don't know.
Do you think
aren't there some people that, real quick, Todd, aren't there some people that, even in this country, because I have a friend actually who mentioned this to me, who see what they perceive to be as leprechauns? Aren't there people uncrazy people who claim to see leprechauns in the continental United States? Or do you ever, I don't know, I had a friend who on St. Patrick's Day, and it's strange and funny because she didn't even know that it was St. Patrick's Day. She called me in a frantic state that she had seen a leprechaun, and that she had seen something that to her resembled, absolutely the image of a leprechaun, and it was afraid. It was afraid, and didn't know, what it was going to do or what its intentions were. And she didn't know that I had to tell her, like, well, it's St. Patrick's Day today. And she was, taken aback, she wasn't even aware that it was St. Patrick's Day. So you've never heard any stories, or is there no, people making this claim that they see leprechauns, or that they've seen a leprechaun or something that looks like a small...
I've never heard anybody identify them as leprechauns, no. Now, I did get a story, and it's one of those, I did print it, but it was somebody seeing what they described as a troll back in the woods in South Carolina. could be true. It was. I mean, the guy
What was
was.
that story? Yeah, tell that story.
I don't know if I really can. Um, anyhow, so don't know what to tell you.
Okay. So anything else we want to cover about the Cherokee Little People before we move on to Bigfoot? Is any more interesting stories?
Yes, yeah,
or...
I can tell you another story. There's a man who lives in eastern Tennessee, the part of Tennessee that's actually north of North Carolina. Most of it's to the west, but this part's north of where I live. And his family had lived for generations on about 200 acres on really beautiful hilly land next to a river. And he contacted me and he said he had little people living on his land. And of course, I trotted myself up there, and I did see I did see little footprints. I did see the entrance where it was an entrance to underground that he showed me, but he told me a number of stories. For some reason, the one that's coming to mind is the one about the young teenage little people are mischievous, like so many teenagers are, no matter what species. And one day the man was walking out in the wooded area, and this little Cherokee little boy was up in the tree. And when the guy came walking along like this, he swung down like this, so his face was right into the face of the man walking, and he was just, being mischievous. The ones that you're most likely to see, whether they're Bigfoot or little people or human people, the ones that are the most mischievous tend to be the teenage boys.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there any
And
indication?
he said that those people, there's stories of them coming from Ireland. This ties in with what you were saying, that there are stories of them arriving on the coast and going up the river and ending up in this part of the country, and that they originated from Ireland. I'd forgotten all about that story. I'll have to dig that up and share it on the website again.
Yeah, I was going to say about, if there's ones that have red hair, I mean, where did those genes come from? How did those genes get into?
I've always thought it was very much like Ireland.
Yeah. Now, is there any similarities between these creatures and other, like, say, Bigfoot or other cryptids, in that they seem to possess supernatural abilities? Is there any kind of stories? I mean, the fact that they're mischievous suggests a little bit of boldness, but you would think that they would not be doing, if their whole existence and survival depended upon our civilization not knowing about them. You would think that mischievousness would not be one of their characteristics.
You also have to realize that man lived on that land. His family had lived on there for generations, and all the generations knew about this. So they're all living there on 200 acres. I think it puts it into a whole different category. They're kind of used to people, that family. I think that would be the explanation for that one. I think,
and maybe they're only mischievous with people that they know aren't going to.
No, you can't limit it to that. Like the one out in South Dakota, humans had messed with their bow and arrow and quiver, and they were pissed. And so they were being mischievous because they were not very happy. Totally different reason for what the little one did swinging out of the tree. Totally different motivations. It's just like with us, we can't assign a motivation to all of us. We could do the same thing for different reasons.
Right. I just wondered if they didn't have any kind of, as it seems that many of these cryptids and strange creatures, not that these are necessarily strange creatures, but it seems though that, with all of these, Bigfoot most especially, there's something strange going on in terms of their just infallible capacity to prevent official discovery. They seem elusive, unusually elusive. Like there's something more going on that has to explain how they're able to keep hidden. And
well, like the where we got involved with the Bigfoot was in the greater Cashiers area. It's like a village at the top of a mountain ridge, surrounded by forest, rocky land, and cave land. I think it's harder for them to remain elusive because our society keeps growing and encroaching on the space that they were used to having. So they really do have to be more careful. And the ones that, my conclusion has been that the ETs east of the Mississippi are much more discreet. They're much less likely to be noisy or combative because they're living so close to humans. The stories that you hear about, raving attacks and yelling and screaming and combative behavior tends to be out west. Well, there's more space. And I think that has a lot to do with it. And there's a difference also in the way the Bigfoot appear. We have Bigfoot in Florida, in the swamps. They call them they call them the skunk ape because the Bigfoot stink too. And so that skunk ape kind of makes a sense. And they're smaller. And then the medium-sized ones tend to be here east of the Mississippi. The largest ones seem to be out west in the Rockies. So there's some differences in the way they behave and their size.
And since we're on this subject of Bigfoot quickly, I kind of think that cryptids especially they travel interdimensionally. That's what I kind of think, because
I've never seen that, but I have heard that from people who have reason to be credible witnesses. And probably Dr. Johnson, I don't know if I can think of his name right now. He's out in the West someplace, and he went from not believing in Bigfoot at all to being terribly involved with them, and he had seen them, disappear through a portal. So, he comes across as very credible. But have I ever seen anything like that? No. They're very good about like vanishing before your eyes in one way or another.
Yes.
That's
really what makes me think about this, because, for example, if somebody is out in the woods and they stumble across Bigfoot, the sheer sight of seeing something like that, it can give you a heart attack probably. But It seems like just in a split second, boom, it's gone. And you're left thinking to yourself,
did I see that?
Yes. Did I just see something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just me?
Right.
So yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But, and I don't know if they all have that ability, but you hear enough stories that you can't dismiss that possibility. You just can't.
Absolutely.
But very hard to prove. Very, very hard to prove.
Yes. So. All except for, some footprints or some kind of shelters that they've made, knocking in the woods, perhaps.
The closest we've gotten the footprints, and we've, done tests by putting out different kinds of foods to see what they like and done all sorts of things of that nature. But there's a man who has lived up here in the mountains all of his life. And he said he would take me to a cave where the Bigfoot live on his land. So we go up this gravel road, and then we get out, and he has a sickle in his hand. I'm going, my goodness, why does he have that? Well, it was simply because it would help cut the path to get to the cave. Oh. He wasn't going to use it as a weapon, but I didn't know that instantly. And it was about a half mile from the road to where the cave was. And so when we first started walking, we heard this sound, and I've never known how to describe it. It's like a bird sound that isn't like a bird. Okay. And then off in the direction we're headed, we hear the same sound, and then everything went silent. There were also, I think it was 2 giant footprints right where we heard the first sound. And I feel like the one Bigfoot was warning the other Bigfoot that these snoopy humans were headed in their direction.
Yeah.
So we saw the footprints and we heard the strange calling. Then everything went silent. It was a pretty good sized cave. I have a picture of it in the book, and roughly maybe 8 feet across and 5 feet tall, something like that. And I could not see the back of it. I did take a picture of it, but I confess I was not brave enough to go in it. I didn't know if there would be a Bigfoot in there or a bear, we have lots of wild critters around here. So taking a picture of it from the outside was as brave as I got.
Wow. And that's something. I mean, to have that experience where you actually see this cave, and your mind starts to race, I'm sure, like, there's so many questions, you know what I mean?
I know, and I'm standing there going, you should go in there. I mean, I'm having a debate in my head. You already know who won, but it was a very interesting thing. And the experiments we did with the Bigfoot were interesting. We did food experiments to see what they liked, and they're a little bit like human kids. They love apples. They love nuts. We did things like put asparagus out. They spit it out. That sounds like a kid. But we did all sorts of different kinds of food. We would also put them in different kinds of containers. We started out putting it in like a 6-pack cooler, and we would just tip the lid so you could see what was inside. They would tip it over and take everything. We put a basket out there with a handle. Again, they tip it over and take everything. When we put a basket out there without a handle, they picked up the basket and took the whole thing. So I kind of feel like maybe they'd gotten their hand stuck in a trap or something at some point, and they weren't about to put their hand into the first things. But the one without the handle, they were not afraid of, and we found it later down the path. After they'd eaten all the food, they left the basket. And then again, another experiment was, I don't know, I did a wood burning thing. I think it was a butterfly, but I did several things. And it was left out there for them as a gift because they are into gift giving. Well, it disappeared. Well, this happened just before Christmas, and those who were involved with this project were all on holiday vacation. There were no humans showing up. The gift was returned, and all we could think of was they must have thought that they shouldn't have taken that. I don't know. Maybe that's putting human logic, because after we've been gone for 2 weeks, it was returned to us. So who knows? Makes you wonder.
And I have heard that they are with the gifts. They will accept them.
Do you have time to hear my best Bigfoot story?
Absolutely.
Okay, let me go for it. This is up at the top of the ridge. It's a single lane road, and then there was another road that went between two ridges. At the bottom was a creek and this single lane road, gravel road. So it was about a mile from one gravel road down to the end of the other one. At the end of the road, it opened up into like a bowl-shaped little valley. There was a small house, a big house, a barn, and a pond. And this is one of those stories that it took somebody else a long time to convince the person to talk to me, and went out there and saw the evidence of the Bigfoot just tearing their place up. Now, for years, they knew something was on the land, but there was never a problem. I got pictures in the book about the Bigfoot where you can see the muddy hands all over the front door where they busted in, and muddy kick marks on the bottom of the door. They had their handprint. They broke in once when the woman had gone to town and left the clothes in the dryer, and the clothes were whirling like this. And you can see where their handprints were, and they were obviously looking at this movement inside this window, trying to figure out what was going on. Well, the big house had been owned by the woman's parents. Her father had died, and her mother had moved back to Atlanta, so the big house was empty. So she thought, I'm going to move myself and the kids into the big house, and maybe we'll be okay. Well, they broke into that house too. And one of the most dramatic pictures was that the 17-year-old daughter, even when she would lock her door, even when she wasn't there, because she didn't want the Bigfoot in there. And there's these big gouged marks on the bottom of the door where the Bigfoot had reached under the door and tried to pull it open like this, and the absolute gouges in the door. They also got into the bathroom, tore up the toilet, and the whole back part of the toilet was taken off. They squeezed the toothpaste all over the place. They just did everything. We made jokes that we're glad they didn't know what the toilet was for, because we didn't want to clean up the mess. But also at the same time, we joked that it would also make a great specimen. But the woman got so afraid that she moved off the property completely. And she would come back to check on the property, but she would always have a bodyguard with her with a gun.
Wow.
And it was more than just one Bigfoot. And in one of the rooms upstairs, the Bigfoot had taken like a marker and done markings on the wall all beneath the light switch. So we figured it was one of the younger Bigfoot that were doing that, because the Bigfoot, the big size ones, probably wouldn't squat down that far to do scribbles on the wall. So I've got pictures of the scribbles and pictures of the fingerprints and all of that. And we eventually figured out what was going on. They'd had somebody out there at the pond trying to fix the dam. In other words, the creek came through, they dammed up the creek to make the pond. Somebody was out there with a jackhammer to fix it, and it went right through through something, and all the water went down the hole. The Bigfoot lived in the cave beneath there. On another trip out there, we took a woman who's pretty good at communicating with, everybody, I guess. And she went out by the pond, and she was like talking to the air, letting the Bigfoot know that that was an accident. They didn't mean to do what had happened. On one of the later trips there, we were out on the porch, and we looked over by the front door, and there was like a folded up piece of burlap with some little trinkets and stuff in it.
Oh, wow.
We don't know how long it had been there, because the family always went in from the back door. They didn't use the front door. But after that was like a peace offering, because after that, there was no problem with the Bigfoot.
Wow.
So they went from being absolutely terrified to apparently, peace was made. So we've had some really...
And so that explained the mud.
That explained the mud, absolutely.
And what were the trinkets? Did you take a close look at those trinkets? I mean, were they something that they crafted themselves?
No, I don't. I think it's stuff they picked up. I think it was a scrap piece of like burlap. There was something that was like a metallic looking thing, but it had kind of a odd, I don't know what it was. I couldn't identify it. Again, I have a picture of it in the book so that, people can actually see what it was. Mm-hmm. And, but I felt real fortunate. I was able to get pictures of so many things.
Wow. That's incredible. And it just, it really gets my mind going, because you were saying that it wasn't a great big one, but a smaller one that was making the markings. Right. Do you believe this could have been like a family?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's another man that I write about, and he was a deputy sheriff someplace down in Florida. He got cancer, and so he retired from the force, and he moved up here to the mountains to try to get as healthy as he could. And he had an organic garden, and he lived where there was an old logging road. And the essence of his story was that, I can't do that. One time he heard like kids playing in the water in the stream, and there are no kids around there. And he was very puzzled. And then at another time, I think he was out on his front deck, and he had a light where he parked the car. And he looked out, and there was a family, mama, papa, and two, like teenage Bigfoot walking across the road in front of his place. The man eventually became friends with the male Bigfoot, and he called him Fred. And Fred would come down to the garden when he was gardening, and the man would share some of the stuff from his garden with the Bigfoot.
Do you believe that Bigfoot, they have like a kind of emotional intelligence?
They're absolutely.
Where they can understand intent.
Oh, yeah.
And read
energy. Now, there may be a great deal of difference in intelligence from one Bigfoot to another. Joan Ocean, who is known around the world as a dolphin expert. She was contacted by somebody who wanted to know how she communicated with the dolphins so that she, this other woman, could communicate with the Bigfoot where she lived here. And at some point, Joan made a trip from Hawaii, where she lives, to the mainland of the U.S. and interacted with the Bigfoot. And they were she called them the ancient wise ones, because they really knew more than what we know of coming from most Bigfoot. And they were actually able to write. And I don't mean it was printing, but nevertheless, and she would put a notepad out, and they would leave, notes back and forth.
Really,
So
like they had a written language, like it wasn't just
no,
scribbled.
writing in English. Now, one of them, the male, wrote in something that almost looked like the old Nordic writing,
Yes,
or
yes. Like a Gaelic type of
Odom, something like that.
Odin.
And and so what I will do just for you is I will pull that article up, and I'll post it again real soon on the website so you can see it.
Yeah, and that's what brought me to that question about the intelligence, is because somebody there kind of righted the wrong, so to speak, with them. So yes, that's very fascinating.
Yeah, they're not dumb animals.
I would not believe so. No. Especially to be able to live undetected, especially with a family.
Right. Yep. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, can you tell me? We have talked to cryptozoologists, and they talked a bit about different the different species, red ones, black ones, white ones. Could you tell me if any of these were a certain?
Yeah, they're all reddish brown around here.
Okay,
perfect. And I did get a hair sample about that long, and it was a reddish color.
Very
but that was also a lesson for me. I sent it off for DNA analysis, and the part that makes a Bigfoot unique comes from the paternal side, the father's side, which can only be found in the nuclear DNA. So if you have a string of hair, if you just have the hair itself, it will only come up as human DNA. You have to get the hair follicle, which is where the nuclear DNA is. Yes. And that is unique, and they can't connect it to any other species. It's an unknown species. And so I learned that the hard way, because I didn't have the follicle, and so I spent a lot of money to find out it technically was human.
I was just getting ready to say, because that's what stops a lot of the genetic research, is because they don't have that. If you pull that out in that little end up there, yes,
right, yeah, you have to have the nuclear DNA. And I find when I learned that it's an unknown species on the father's side, I thought that was very, very interesting.
Wow.
And I have a picture of the hair in the book, and you can see it has a reddish tint to it, which was your original question.
Now, do you think that Bigfoot, do you think that they have a big curiosity as well, like to who we are? And
they're very attracted to music. And we've had a number of reports where they will come around and maybe hang out in the trees when people are singing around a campfire. One of the first stories was a boy at a Boy Scout camp, and you could see the Bigfoot off in the trees when they were singing around the campfire. It seems like all creatures respond well to music, and you'll see things on the internet where somebody's playing an instrument and all the cows come. Or
I was just watching a bunch of videos like that.
Yeah.
So, and the Bigfoot are the same way. I recently was talking with 3 guys who are doing Bigfoot research in Tennessee. And I really strongly suggested that they go out there sometime and start do some singing, because they know a place where they see the Bigfoot a lot. And, play the music, because they do like the music.
Now, Mary, you said about the gentleman that had the cancer. who befriended Fred. Do you think that possibly Bigfoot could sense when someone's sick or vulnerable, and that would spark its curiosity and empathy towards a person?
I think that might be possible. I think in this case, they just became friends and over the garden. And there's a story with this Dr. Johnson that I mentioned to you a little bit ago. He claims to have been healed by a Bigfoot. I don't think they all have that capacity. So I think there's a great range of awareness and abilities with the Bigfoot, just like we have with humans.
And they
we can't lump everything into one little package and they're all like this. It's just not the case.
Absolutely. And he, how do I want to put this? He communicated with this Fred, correct?
It was telepathic. They communicated telepathically, and that's pretty universal. It's telepathic with the dolphins. It's telepathic with with your dog. There's a telepathic communication.
Yes.
That's interesting, and I'd like to know. I haven't really delved into this that deeply, but are they hearing, when communicating telepathically with a Bigfoot, are they hearing the English language? Like pieces of language in their mind, or
it's at two levels. They communicate with a human telepathically, but they do have language. And there's a couple of times that some of our researchers have gotten some really good recordings where you can hear them talking.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in their language. They're talking to each other, not to a human. Human wouldn't understand.
Oh, there is that. Yeah, we talked about this on one episode. What it was, the Sierra tapes or something like that, or that one researcher caught a bunch of verbiage and or grunts and noises and stuff, and seeming conversation.
What I've heard is beyond grunts. I mean, it does sound like some kind of effort to communicate. I mean, talk.
Mm-hmm.
Just not in a way we understand. It wasn't a grunt.
Right. No. Okay. Yeah.
Which I was just getting ready to ask Jim if you think maybe the grunts were because that's how we as humans would perceive it, even though it's some kind of more intelligent type of thing.
All right. Have you got a piece of paper? Todd, do you have a piece of paper?
I do, yes.
Would you write down a note to yourself to send me your email?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And I'll find some things that you might find interesting. I'll send you links.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, that would be awesome.
Not everything, but at least something,
Absolutely. Now, do you think that I have this question? Well, you raised the question, actually. Are they human, like based on research experience? What do you think Bigfoot is? Do you think that they're part human, hybrid, alien?
The genetics prove that they're part human. When they analyze the hair, it becomes human. If they get the follicle, it's this unknown species. So it must be a hybrid.
In an ape, so it's some type of.
The father's side doesn't connect. It doesn't link to any known species.
So,
wow! So that could be extraterrestrial.
You can't say it's an ape.
That could be extraterrestrial.
It could.
Yeah,
it could. In fact, if you think about it, I think the Earth is a grand experimental place in the universe. I think there's such a variety of different kinds of living creatures, such a variety of plant growth. I think there's more than there's probably on maybe most planets. That's just the way I've pieced it together from things I've put together over the years.
Wow.
And I think there's a lot of hybrids that will blend in. In fact, I'm taking more of a new direction, and not so interested in just the ships in the sky. I mean, that gets boring after a while. But we have increasingly, we're hearing more and more people who are having face-to-face interactions with ETs or hybrids that look like us. And, we have to get beyond the gray aliens with the big eyes. That scares everybody. It's beginning to sound like the majority of ETs interacting with us look quite human.
Yes. Jim, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories. My own mother, in the 70s, had an encounter with someone who called himself Jim Peterson, who one night proceeded to tell my mom this gigantic story about himself not being actually human, but being an extraterrestrial. And for the course of an entire night, gave her this just rich story about everything, about their culture and their planet and everything. And he was identical, as far as she could tell, to a human. And I never knew what to make of that for the longest time, until I got into this and realized that, oh, there's actually a lot of stories of people encountering human-looking, rather than humanoid, human-looking ETs that resemble humans strongly. Some of them, I don't know if you've ever heard, Mary, of what was her name? Dolores. There was an encounter, I think in the 60s, at some UFO convention. Someone showed up. This woman, well, it was a woman and a man. They showed up at this UFO convention somewhere, I think maybe out west somewhere. And there's great pictures of this woman. And you can see, I don't know, maybe you can look this up, Todd. Look up, if you type in Dolores and human ET, you'll probably find it. I don't know if you've ever heard this story.
Dolores Cannon?
No, not Dolores Cannon. It's not someone well known. It's just this photograph of one of these human. I think it's amongst, like, there's some, what people claim to be images of these human looking ETs. This is one that I feel is authentic. It's clearly a photograph from that era, from the 60s, well before
Photoshop.
Photoshop and stuff like that. And she looks like a human woman, but if you look closely, she's got this ridge down the center of the forehead to the nose. And then something about the nose holes themselves are odd and different and curved. And then maybe something about the eyes too that just don't seem quite the same. And I think it's the one picture that I feel is, I think one of them. I think one of these human-looking ETs. I don't know if you could locate
You'll
it.
have to, if you have a chance, send me a copy of it. I'd love to take a look at it.
Oh, I definitely will. I have it on my phone. I have it when I get a chance. Yeah, I can send it.
Okay, I'll tell you one more story, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Sure.
There's a man. His name was William Tompkins. He worked at NASA. He worked at the highest levels. He worked for von Braun. And
I've heard of him. Yeah,
you've heard of him.
Mhm.
Okay. And he said that there were the reason they made such swift progress when President Kennedy wanted the space program to go real rapidly. And he said they had these very beautiful secretaries, but they were ETs, and they helped and guided them through the development of the space program. And when the engineers would get stuck, they would kind of give them a clue as to what they should do next. And anyhow, it's there's a whole book. I don't remember the title of his book right now, but his name is William Tompkins, and he did write a book about that. And he talked about how the ETs were at NASA helping with the development of the space program.
Wow, interesting. I did not hear that story. And these were human-looking ETs, like ones that looked.
He said they were beautiful women.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
Well,
Mary,
anyhow, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. We had talked quite a bit about the Cherokee Little People and some Bigfoot. Can we talk for a few minutes about some of these underground bases?
Well, only if you have time, Mary.
Yes.
No,
Just
it's all no, not that's a whole subject unto itself. Maybe sometime when you have a hole in your schedule, we can talk about underground bases.
very good. That sounds
sound good?
fantastic.
All
Yeah,
right.
okay, I'll do that.
So don't forget to send me an email, and I'll be in touch with you guys.
I won't
Sounds
for
good,
sure.
yeah.
And Mary,
Okay.
thank you so much for coming on. Man, just listening to your story so far, I am blown away.
It's been an interesting time up here in North Carolina.
I can't wait to be able to talk to you again and just pick your brain a little bit more.
All righty. You guys have a good evening. Good to talk to you.
Thank you
care.
very much.
Thank you,
Take
man.
care now.
Bye-bye.
Well, Jim, that was a wonderful, fascinating story about the Cherokee Little People and the Bigfoot. I really can't wait to see if she will come back on to talk to us about these underground bases.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. There is her basis interview. If anyone is interested and doesn't want to wait for our future interview with her, you can find a recent interview of her on Miles Johnson's channel, the Basis Project channel, and she talks about that in the beginning of that episode. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Very interesting. And I'm going to bring up this real quick here while we're here. Let's see if I can present here. Let's present this share screen, and I am going to bring up her website so that people can go check her out. So Sky Ships Over Cashiers.com. If you click on calendar, you will find it. Let me see here. We'll click on Editor's Corner. So Editor's Corner, and you go the whole way down towards the bottom. There is her books. These books are all directly available from her. There's been, I guess, some issues with these books, and they keep getting how did she say it, Jim?
Particularly with Spy in the Sky.
Yes.
I think all the other ones you can just get easily on Amazon, but Spy in the Sky, you have to contact her directly.
Well, it says all these books are available through her. So, and I do believe I did see some of these books on Amazon, except for the Spy in the Sky. Now, if you want this, I'm going to put this link in the comments right now so that everybody can grab them, because I am definitely very curious on her book to see some of these pictures and things like that. So, and usually I would go through these books before, but Mary was a last minute guest for us, and it's we are very glad that she decided to come on. Okay,
yeah, I actually think I'm going to contact her and get Spy. I'm really curious as to the Antarctica stuff and Spy in the Sky, and
yes,
and the other stuff. I mean, I feel like I need to see what that looks like, and I'm very curious, and I'm probably going to contact her and get a copy of that one.
Yes, and I will make sure to put this for our viewers. I'll put this link again. Maybe I'll just do a whole post on it for these books, especially The Spy in the Sky, Secrets and Cover-Ups on Earth and Beyond. That is what the name of the book is. So, yes, fantastic. I learned quite a bit, especially about the Cherokee Little People. I've heard the stories some of the stories just from researching, but I've never delved into it. And I think I came about it from the giants, the Indian giants.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard about from 1800s and early 1900s, which again, she brought up this point that there's barely, if any, type of evidence out there. They found all these bones of these giants in a cave, and I don't know whatever happened to them, but apparently we're not supposed to know about it.
Yeah, I think if anybody's interested in that, the best source to learn more about that is, I think, Michael Cramo's book, Forbidden Archaeology, I think is what it's called. And I know he's, I think more than anyone else, really gone down that rabbit hole as far as the giants. There used to be, I mean, you still see these from time to time, but now, we just can't be sure of the provenance of any photos online. But there used to be a lot of photographs in circulation of giant skeletons, and some that were really huge, that seemed authentic at the time. I don't run across these that much anymore on Facebook, but yeah, it's a really interesting area to look into, and maybe we should have someone in the future, on about that.
Absolutely. I love anything dealing with Indian folklore and things like that. Now, also, Mary did write a book about Cherokee Little People as well. So on that website, on her website, you can find that as well. And she obviously has them all, so you can send her some mail and she can get you those books. She has one for Bigfoot, underground military bases hidden in North Carolina mountains, tangible evidence of Jesus left behind for us to find. She has some very good books out there.
Mm-hmm. And last thing, before we wrap up, Todd, I sent you a link to. I found that it's Dolores Barrios, the woman who was at the UFO convention, who was unusual in appearance. If you can bring that up real quick, I sent you a link. Hopefully, it comes up. I just, just for the audience, since we talked about that, I did find that and I sent it to you. And if we could bring that up real quick, just as a last little thing before we close.
You brought me up a Google search.
And nothing happens when you click on it?
Yes.
Or it doesn't go to Dolores Barrios? Or type in Dolores Barrios, Barrios, and you should be able to get to it.
B-A?
Dolores, Barrios. It's a black and white photograph of a woman, and there's multiple photographs. There's also photographs of the man, who I cannot tell anything peculiar about the man, but the woman, you can see, at least in the close-up shot of her face.
I have to prove that I'm a human. Hold on one second.
Oh, okay. But
let me get
Richard
this.
Dolan is there's some Richard Dolan has some good stories about people who have encountered the human-looking ETs. Also, what is that other English researcher? Blanking on his name. Oh, okay, you got it up. Okay. Yeah, so can you zoom at all into the? Can you zoom, Todd, into the picture?
Let me see.
The leftmost picture, the close one of her face.
Let me see if I can. There we go. So that's as far as I
can. Right. Okay, that's good. So yeah, if you look at her forehead, there is a protrusion running down the center of her forehead that.
Yeah, like right here.
Yeah, that looks not like anything I've seen on a human before. And also her nose hole. I feel like there's something about her nose holes. If you look at her nose hole, there's something odd there, like about the curvature of her nose holes. And maybe just the whole sort of, it's kind of like a flaring kind of nostril that is a little bit different, I feel,
Yes.
than I've seen on any other human. And then people say the eyes. And if you look at the eyes, they look kind of big. They look kind of maybe a little bit disproportionately large. And then some people say like the eyelashes may be peculiar also.
Right.
But I think, and this is just my opinion, that this is the real McCoy. I think you're seeing an ET woman. And to me, that is fascinating, that there are ETs that look almost exactly like us, and are pretty. I think she's pretty and beautiful. And yeah, I mean, people, I don't know about the whole thing. Now, I know it says on there that she claimed to be from Venus. I think that is false. I don't think she said anything like that. I think that's a false narrative that sprung up in relation to these pictures that I don't think there is any real provenance to, but I could be wrong.
Well,
but
this
yeah,
would
and
definitely be something to revisit and come up with some research on this.
yeah, I would like to, because I've always been fascinated with this. I know the only thing I know that I could say in addition to this is that they did not want their pic. There was two of them. There's that man there too who looks kind of just like a human man to me, the man.
Right.
But they did not want their pictures taken. And when people started noticing, word started to circulate around that, there's some unusual looking humans here at the convention. Did you see that woman over there? Look at her face. Once they realized that they were attracting attention, they got kind of hedgy and left the convention and did not want their photographs taken, but evidently someone just disregarded that and photographed her anyway. But yeah, she's got human clothing on, looks like sandals. I mean, that's just, to me, that's extraordinary, that that they're walking amongst us, and, people like her.
Right.
And that my own mother, might have potentially crossed paths with one of them in the 70s in Houston.
Right. And here's the thing. We talk to a lot of people, and we hear about these hybrids and things. And this is what, this is what the end product could be. There's this lady who looks like a lady. There's a couple of different things, like you said, about the brow, or the forehead and the nose. Her eyes do look a little big. But how many more of these are there? If this is a hybrid, how many hybrids?
Yeah, I think that I've heard that there are ones that are completely identical to us on the outside, that aren't like Dolores Barrios, that you cannot tell at all apart from a regular human, and that there are ones that are very similar to us but just have minor differences. So it seems as though that there's not just one species that's human looking. There's multiple species. And what are they up to? What are they doing? I know the story that Richard Dolan told. Someone came up to him at one point during a book signing and said, "I have a great story to tell you." And she told him the story of when she was little. This was in Pennsylvania too, Todd. This was in our state. I think in eastern. No, I think in Western Pennsylvania, where we're at. I don't know exactly where. She was in church and she saw this couple walk in, and she was just taken aback by the beauty of these people, and they just kind of stuck out. They just didn't seem like the typical folk that went to that church. And there was just something remarkable about them and their clothing. She was interested in fashion and stuff, and thought that there was something strange about their clothing that was really interesting. And she sat right behind them in church, and they were right in front of her. And at some point during the mass, all of a sudden, she started hearing them in her mind talking to each other. And it went something like, I think the man said to the woman, "It looks like we're fitting in pretty well here, and we don't seem to be raising any suspicion," or
Oh.
something to that effect. And then the woman says, "Well, except for the girl behind us who's listening to us right now." And then all of a sudden it went silent, and she did not hear any more after that. But that piqued her interest. And she, as soon as mass was over, she just got in her mind that she was going to follow them. And they kind of darted early, but then she, tried to catch up with them, and eventually, spotted them outside. And they headed right into a forested area, and she kept following them, and then locked eyes on this other man who was standing there at the edge of the forest line, right where they went in at. He was very large, almost kind of what she described as kind of like a lurch, like large man, who had the demeanor that he was a bodyguard of some kind, and kind of something about her presence suggested, that he was kind of guarding them. And she stopped in her tracks, and that's really the end of the story. But there's a lot of interesting stories like that. And maybe in a future episode, we can get into more of this, because it's a really fascinating topic. And I don't think we talk enough about it. The ones that are living amongst us, what are they? What were those two people doing in the church? Were they just coming for the experience, to experience human culture because they're fascinated about it? I kind of think that that's probably what it is. But who knows, what they're up to or what they're doing.
Maybe they're here to observe, watch and observe.
Yeah, or maybe they're up to more than that, and they just kind of have a cover, and they're living just like a spy in a foreign land. You go to church and you do the normal things because you're acting out of cover. You have to seem like a normal human. You have to do things that normal humans do, whilst you're underneath, conducting espionage and collecting intelligence from sources.
Yes.
I don't know. But anyway, we'll have to revisit this at some point in a future episode and have someone interesting on to talk about this.
Yes. So if anybody knows anybody that's out there watching or listening, please send us an email, get a hold of us somehow. If you're watching us, then you're probably already part of our Paranomaly family. And we want to hear from you for sure. If you've had any experiences with extraterrestrials, anything like that, please get a hold of us for sure. All right. Well, Jim, I say I'm going to wrap it up right now. I had a very good time talking to Mary. I hope that someday she will come back on, talk a little bit about the underground bases.
The underground bases, which are interesting because they're in the east and not on the west. You only hear about the underground bases normally anyway out west. And what's interesting about these underground bases is that they're in North Carolina, of all places, in the mountains.
Yes,
that's what's particularly fascinating, and I think what motivated Mary to write about these bases, that they're in the east, and not a lot of people are talking about underground bases in the east,
right?
So,
because what I mean, there's quite a few that I've heard about, but when you start getting into, like the Denver airport, underneath there is supposed to be a huge city. So I have no idea. I know it's fascinating, and I've talked to somebody that has been to that airport, and I was like, is there a heavy military presence there? And they're like,
Yeah,
no.
well, I travel to that airport when I go visit my sister, and I'm always kind of, looking around. I've never, because I'm always in a hurry, to catch, you're always in a hurry to catch your plane. So I didn't really get to explore. There's supposedly murals, strange
Yes.
looking murals and stuff. I haven't actually
Apocalypse.
seen any of them. I know the architecture of the place is weird. It's a very big airport. There's supposedly something, although I also haven't been able to independently verify this, though I hope to sometime in the future. There's reports of the fence, the barbed wire on the outer perimeter fence. Now, there's different fences, in that whole airport complex, and some of the ones I saw were normal looking, but supposedly the outer perimeter fence, the barbed wire on the fence is facing and leaning the wrong direction than it should be with a normal barbed wire fence, as if it's meant to protect the outside from what may emerge from the inside. I don't know. That's the insinuation. But I don't know. Yeah, and then there's I did see the strange statue. There's a statue of a horse. Oh no, I forget what it's called. Like it's like the name has to do with devil or somehow, and there's a story about the man who designed the horse, the architect or whatever. It fell on him and killed him.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I think that's all I know about the Denver airport. But yeah, fascinating stuff. Well, I think the reality is of underground bases that the entire continent, probably really the entire world, is just underneath of it. It's just honeycombed with bases, and there's connections between all of these. And I think we would be shocked. There it is. Yep. Yeah, we drove past that.
I was just
When
going
I
to
went
say,
to
is
visit my
that it?
sister. Yep, that is it. Yeah. And what's it called?
Let
There's
me
a
see.
name.
It's by Louis
Oh,
Jimenez.
which is called Mustang. Okay, I thought it was something different.
Yeah,
I
it
guess
looks
it's
like
just
that's
called
what it's
Mustang.
called. Mustang.
I thought it. I think it has a nickname that's like the Devil Horse or LDR or some
Well, it
kind
kind of looks like that
of.
horse.
Yeah, it's a strange looking horse. Yeah, and it fell
Look at
on
the
the guy.
eyes on that.
Apparently, I know. Yeah, so yeah, that's the thing about the Denver airport. There's just a lot of like, what the heck's going on with this art and design? It seems a little occultish,
Yeah.
and the horse, definitely seems to fit the bill with that. But yeah, anyway, well, yeah, we'll get into this in a future episode, hopefully. But yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And like I said, I've asked people that I know that's been there and asked if they had a heavy presence of military people. They said no. I was like, what about police? And they're like, no. So I said, any military vehicles? I mean, come on, give me something. And they're like, no, it's just a extra big airport. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like many underground bases, it's not conspicuous from the above ground that there's anything there. I mean, I was just told recently, just real quick, by a friend who lives in the Gettysburg area that has some family and relatives that worked in an underground base in Gettysburg, and they heard rumors that that's where the president goes in the case of an emergency or something like that. So I'm just saying that, even people like, places like Gettysburg, no one would ever think, there's an underground base in Gettysburg. But I think that that's just, the nature of underground bases, that they're kept secret. They're not trying to advertise them, from the outside, that there's, something different here. I mean, maybe there's some exception to that rule in the case of the Denver airport, and the strange stuff on the surface there. But I think for the most part, they're kept secret, and there's efforts made to keep it that way.
Yes. And
But
I just quickly I looked that up, underground base in Gettysburg, and apparently there's a old abandoned Air Force base with secret tunnels that go all through the place. So
okay, I haven't looked that up. I just was told this story, actually, I think just 2 days
hold
ago from this person that I know.
This is abandoned Air Force base in Gettysburg, South Dakota.
Okay.
That's not it. So yes, I will have to research into that, because like you said, what's the these underground bases, I don't know, they trip me out. I remember a few years back, I don't know how many years back, they were talking about all these Walmarts that were closing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that.
All the military presence at these Walmarts, and I'm thinking, what? And someone said that they seen digging equipment and all kinds of things. Are they building underneath? Are they going underneath the Walmarts and connecting to other tunnels? And it would be inconspicuous, because they could say,
right.
oh, we're using this for whatever, some storage or whatever. So who knows?
Right. Yeah. To me, that seems possible, that that they own these mega corporations. They own the Walmart Corporation, that they could use their stores as a front for access points.
Yes.
And surely they would need potentially to have a lot of various access points in different locations. And if you own Walmart Corporation, you could certainly use that as a means to create all over the place various access points. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's truth to that, and there's a number of Walmarts, or maybe many Walmarts that have a connection to these. I think all over there are connecting points, and they have to be in some kind of building, somewhere. But surely there should be the means to investigate this, because you can be on the inside, at Walmart. You can be high up in the company, and you might not be able to find the access point, but you might be able to find something peculiar. In a lot of cases, and I don't know if this is the case with Walmart, because I'm not sure they have elevators, but in certain places, certain buildings that just seem like innocuous buildings, they will have an elevator. And how you get to the access point is that there's a special key that goes into the elevator, and when you turn that key, you can access lower levels and get into the transit system underneath. That was actually something that Tony Rodriguez witnessed in his story, his adventure that he had, or misadventure.
Well, let me see if I can ask the wise one, how far apart that Walmarts are. How far apart are Walmarts?
Todd, you're diving.
Oh, you're cutting
Here,
in and out.
blend.
You're cutting in and out. So repeat it.
Got it.
It's because they don't want us to know.
Yes. And that's weird too, because there should be nothing holding this back. Can you repeat that again?
Sure, you're diving into some serious intrigue.
Well,
yeah, she's not gonna say, and that's okay, because I was just curious on how far apart these Walmarts are, and they're not very far. So underground,
within 30 miles. I think with every
Underground.
Walmart. Probably another Walmart within a 30-mile radius.
Some are even closer.
That's what my guess would be.
I mean, look at there was a Walmart in Westmont, and then it went to Richland. So if it was still there, that's not 20 miles away. So just think if you drilled underneath and connected them.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter what they do with the building because the tunnel's already built.
Right.
So,
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to delve into this in another podcast and
absolutely
go down the rabbit hole.
All right, my friends. Thank you all very much for watching, listening, participating. It was a very good show tonight. And we hope to see you all on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranormallypodcast@gmail.com. You can also visit us at paranormallypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.